What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hawks Film Room podcast. A pretty impressive win for the Hawks today against a red hot Golden State Warriors team that had only lost one game with Jimmy Butler in the lineup after the trade deadline. Now, slight caveat, of course, Stephen Curry did not play in tonight's game, and you could definitely tell that this team is not the same without Curry by any means. But when Jimmy Butler was in the game, they were still pretty effective against the Hawks. Gary Payton as well kind of caused some problems down the stretch with his movement off the ball. But the Hawks were able to hold the lead for the majority of the game. So they ended up leading, I want to say for the vast majority of the game, there were only two lead changes, and that was in the first quarter. For the rest of the game, it was a wire-to-wire win for the Hawks. Their biggest lead was 22. Now, of course, the final margin was 9 points. There were some really large runs in this game. The Hawks were up 20 by 2 minutes left in the first quarter. Through a mixture of some Jimmy Butler, buffoonery in terms of like he's just so crafty around the basket. Like he's constantly putting pressure, whatever it may be. The Warriors were kind of able to hang around a little bit more than you'd like to see. Again, the Hawks did lead for 46 minutes, but there were stretches where it felt like they could let go of the rope. But here's a really important thing and something that I think this Hawks team has done so much better at this season, especially throughout this season, right? They've gotten better at it. Sometimes things are going to be out of control, right? Um, the officiating crew tonight wasn't the best. There was an obvious charge foul that wasn't overturned, among other things. Um, again, the Warriors, since Jimmy Butler has arrived, they've been the second highest team in terms of free throw rate. Tonight, they ended up taking, let me pull that up. Tonight, they ended up shooting 26 free throws. They had a 31% free throw rate. Prior to the deadline, before Jimmy Butler was there, they were one of the worst teams in the league in terms of getting to the free throw line. Pretty much as soon as he's arrived, they've gotten way better getting there. They went from 29th to second, and they were averaging around 25 free throws per 100 possessions. Tonight, they got to 26. There were a combination of 39 fouls called in tonight's game, 23 of them for the Hawks. Again, disadvantage against the Hawks, 16 in favor of the Hawks. But with all that being said, they came out with a win. Jimmy Butler got to the free throw line a ton. He took 14. Then the really impressive thing, too, is I think the Hawks were relatively connected defensively. There were some lapses, particularly in the fourth quarter, where I felt like it was fatigue related or just, lack of attention to detail. There were some moments where they could have been better. But tonight's episode will be a little bit different than my typical format. Some of that is because of the hour I'm recording, but also I just think this particular game is a really good example and just a good sort of case for the overall state of this Hawks team because Onyeka Okongwu, man. But before we even talk about him in particular, I just want to point out just how balanced this team has become. Okay, they recorded the 33rd game this season with at least 30 assists. That's a franchise record. It's currently third best in the NBA. The only teams above are Nikola Jokic's Denver Nuggets and then the Indiana Pacers, who play a very similar style to Atlanta. What's really remarkable, this Hawks team had 5 people record at least 6 assists. Of course, Trae Young leading the way with 10. You had Onyeka Okongwu with 6, Dyson Daniels with 6, Caris Levert with 6, and then Reed Krejci with 6. What's really crazy about that, right? It's the first time in Hawks history they've had 5 guys with 6+ assists. The first time since 2008 they've had 8 guys clear 5+ assists. That was a team without Horford on it. And this has only happened 13 times in NBA history and only 3 times this century. Okay. So what I think that stat tells me is that this team is so much better at sharing the ball and they have so many more options down the stretch. So we'll do 2 things today. Okay. We're really going to look at Onyeka Okongwu's game. He put up 22, 12, and 6. He had a really great first half, pretty rare among centers. So we'll dive into that. And then we'll talk a little bit just about the overall sort of different approach to taking down the clutch. And there were still some tough shots, some rough decision making. But there's a different approach that's been much more sustainable, which is why ultimately I attribute them to being much more solid down the stretch than they have been in the past. And also, it just helps with all the moves they've made. But on Onyeka Okongwu, we're going to start there. Like I said, the man is playing incredible basketball. And honestly, he had, I think he's getting. I've said this about him in the past, but I think he was already one of the most versatile big men in the league, right? When you look at some like what he's done against certain teams, like 2020 game, I think he had a near triple double. In some games, I'm pulling up his best performances right now. Um, he has just so many different ways to be impactful, right? So against San Antonio, he went for 30 and 12 and 5. Against Phoenix, he had a 20 and 20 game. He's had multiple games with multiple assists, and of course, has been really good in the class. 16 and 16 versus Indiana recently. Tonight, 22, 12 and 6. Since he's became a starter, he is playing out of his mind. Once we get to that 30 game mark, I've got a tweet ready to sort of laud him for his accomplishments. Um, but I want to take a closer look at his first half. His first half, after the presser, I had to let him know that like he's entered Jokic combos, and he laughed and he entertained it a little bit. But he had 18.6 rebounds, 5 assists. Okay, that's only been matched by 10 other bigs in NBA history, and that includes guys like Nikola Jokic, of course, and then Shaquille O'Neal. And am I saying Onyeka is going to be Shaq or Jokic? No. But what I am saying is that as the NBA is getting more and more dynamic, and as you have to figure out different ways to attack defenses, having someone like Onyeka who can, operate, as a traditional big in some senses, where it's, he's operating in the pick and roll, or he's finishing alley oops, he's setting hard screens. The different types of things he can do on the court is just so valuable, right? So this first play here, you're gonna see him and Veet are just playing random here. Um, you've got um, Trey gets 2 on the ball, right? So Post and Buddy Hield are tracking the ball. Then Veet is immediately going to realize that Post is not going to recover to Onyeka, and you have to respect him as a shooter at this point. Since being named a starter, he's shooting over 30, almost 39% from three. It's just about 2 attempts per game, but he's been much better as of late. That's big. Then this next play, you're going to see Onyeka. He's going to catch this pass from Trey between Draymond Green, who's like basically jumping on him. Trey gets that pass through. It's a long closeout for Draymond. Onyeka knocks it down. We'll talk about the impact of him making these shots a little bit later. Here, what I love about Onyeka too is just his screening and his chemistry with Trey, right? So instead of he knows that the Warriors want to put 2 on the ball. So instead of lingering around and making it easier for them to sort of put as much pressure as possible on Trey, he's going to leak into this space and then use his size as a threat at the basket, right? So Moses Moody comes all the way over, and that leaves Dyson Daniels open on the catch, where he's again, I think he's shooting almost 45% from 3 since the trade deadline or since Jalen went down, and he's been money off the catch. So, obviously teams are going to have to make that decision sometimes. Like Moses Moody, if he doesn't help over here, this is going to be a layup. But Dyson Daniels has been able to make guys consistently pay here, and that's going to be huge for his offensive viability, of course. And then you get to see some little bit more dynamic offensive stuff here from Onyeka, right? So he caught this pass from Trey, and he's going to run this handoff, but with the way Gary Payton is denying it, from Dyson, right? So the way Gary Payton is playing this, Onyeka immediately knows, okay, I'm going to flip the action this way, right? And by flipping it to the weak side, he's engaging a different side of the court, and takes it away from the best perimeter defender on the floor. And now, because of that screen that Niang has set, V. Krejci has a bit of advantage, and no one's able to contest him on that floater, which honestly was probably he was probably going to miss this, but it then Post like hit it off the rim. So yeah, that was 2 points for the Hawks. Here again, you see that Onyeka is very smart about the way he's going to play this screening action. He knows that the Warriors want to put 2 on Trae Young. They also started guarding Trey with Jimmy Butler, which kind of made it tougher. If you notice, if you look at Trey's shot chart, or just in general his box score, he ended up only taking 4 threes tonight. A lot of that was because Jimmy Butler was guarding him. And if Jimmy Butler's guarding him and Trey shoots a 3 and he misses, Jimmy Butler's going to run down. He's going to post him up immediately, right? So that's sort of like the defensive offensive trade-off that I thought was pretty interesting from the Warriors there. But back to Onyeka, right? So there's that initial screen, and then Onyeka's going to stay within Trey's vision, and he's just going to be aggressive. He was destroying Post around the basket. His hook shot is automatic. He has great touch on it. Again, if I'll pull up the numbers really quick, but um, he has been money on hook shots this season. He is shooting. Well, funny enough, throughout the entirety of the season, he hasn't been great. He's in the 95th percentile in frequency, but he wasn't really good to start the season, right? And again, if you look at his starting numbers, which was his first start was against the Knicks on the 20th. Since then, he's shooting 57% on hook shots. After he's shooting about like 48% for the season. So everything I think has just been a little bit easier from him as a starter. Like I just think he knows his role a bit more. He gets to his spots a bit better, and he's been super productive in all different facets of like being a starting center. Here you're going to see him take advantage of the mismatch. So the Warriors do a lot of switching. They're one of the more versatile defenses in the NBA. But when you have someone like Onyeka who can be a strength mismatch finder, you can see his ability to leverage that size here. And what I like about this is, even if he does turn into the help a bit, he's still getting to he caught the defense off guard here, right? Like so. He can't really tell where Kuminga is going to show help here, but by spitting off of Moses Moody, he takes him out of the equation. Probably an and one opportunity here, and he finishes through the contact, points to the ref, like, yo, yeah, he fouled me. Again, he's just going to walk guys down and get to his spots. It's real easy, real simple, nice touch around the basket. And it's from the Hawks screening early and running on these possessions that creates these mismatches, right? So here he's running the floor, easy layup. Well, I thought it looked funny when I was in the building. I don't know why he kicked his leg up like that, but converts it nonetheless. Again, here the ghost screen, which again we know the Warriors want to put two on the ball. They have their two best defenders here on Trey. That is Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler. When Onyeka ghosts it, Jimmy isn't quite sure where he is, and Trey's able to thread a needle as soon as Jimmy turns his head here. Trey's going to let that ball go. If he throws it while Jimmy still has his eyes somewhat near the ball, this is going to be a turnover. But instead, it's an open layup crafted by Trey's pass-making ability, but also his scoring gravity. And then Onyeka understanding that there's no need to make contact here because they're going to blitz him anyway. So let me just float into the open space. So really great awareness from Onyeka. And this is the value of having someone who's been in the system for a very long time, right? So I really like seeing those little smaller interactions between guys. Here you see like Draymond was legitimately closing out on him after he hit that three. And it's just an easy read. This was a broken play that ended up being a layup for Zach. Both him and Dyson had some really nice layups in this game. But yeah, he's going to switch hands midair, get to the left hand, get that around Kuminga, who I know a lot of Hawks fans are, fans of. I'm not exactly on that same boat. Taking advantage of a mismatch here. Easy. Again, this is because Golden State wants to switch heavy. You see the weak side action relocation from Zachary Ricochet here intended to occupy Buddy Hield. He's in no man's land anyway, so it doesn't even matter. But it could just he feels Moses' weight change as he goes for the steal, and he spins away, gets it up in the air. Again, that's probably a foul. And Onyeka still he's hooping, man. He's going straight through that contact. Here's at the top of the key, in some sort of delay action look. You've got Dyson cutting behind as Niang cuts to the middle. Not the best spacing. I kind of feel like sometimes, this may have been something that Niang just wanted to attack this mismatch, and he did a good job of getting through Podziemski, getting to the basket. And then I think we've got one more example here. So Onyeka's going to snag this offensive rebound. I think I saw a Grant or someone else tweet that Onyeka's really good at getting these without getting an offensive foul. Like he does a really good job of going vertical and not leaning over the guy and just using his quick bounce and then his length to snag it over Jimmy Butler. Again, another foul probably. This play was also funny because Trey was able to, in the beginning of this clip, especially from my vantage point, like he had Draymond stumbling just a bit. So you see Draymond's losing balance, makes contact here. Again, probably foul. Onyeka gets it, and then watch the Jimmy. Like Draymond just ends up on the floor anyways. Trey looks at him. It was a fun game to watch, a lot of because the players were talking a lot of smack. Niang was hot, so when he's hot, he's talking crazy to the crowd. Podziemski said something early on to Trey, and from that point on, Trey put 8 straight points on his head. Definitely a lot of fun to watch tonight. But before we talk a little bit about the clutch execution. I want to show one more Onyeka clip that just sort of points out why his gravity as a shooter is so important, right? So on this particular play, you have 1 second. Yes, it was a play where he was able to draw 2 people to close out on him, which is not something that we've seen consistently from Onyeka, of course. Like I think in general, like volume is much more indicative of how much respect you get from a defense, right? So the more volume you can shoot from 3, sometimes that could gain you even like tougher closeouts than it is overall effectiveness, right? Like teams aren't going to close out on Jonas Valanciunas, who shoots a really good percentage, or Nikola Jokic, for example. They're not going to close out on Jokic, even though he's shooting 45% from 3, as hard as they will like Steph Curry, obviously, right? But volume plays a huge part of that. And as his volume is ticked up and his effectiveness has ticked up, is the effect of the gravity he has as a offensive player, right? So this is coming off out of a delay action where you have Onyeka at the top of the key as a facilitator. He's running this handoff with Caris. It's supposed to be a step-up screen here for Caris to operate. He's going to attack Podziemski. Draymond's going to dig. And as the ball comes out, look at the urgency from Quinton Post and Draymond here to get out to Onyeka. And that's a really great read from Onyeka. And also just the fact that he's drawing this attention from a great defensive player with great defensive awareness off the best shooter on the floor, off the floor, right? And it's a wide open look for Niang, and he's going to make those all day. And this is all crafted from Onyeka's threat as a shooter, right? So when I asked Quinn about this, not this particular play, but like the spacing and like where he likes Onyeka shooting them from, he said, like, like I like having him in the corner because that means he's spaced. But if he can, and as he has shown, as he can continue to hit them from above the break or as trailing or picking and popping, then I think you start to unlock some really interesting stuff with him. Now, I think I got asked a pretty interesting question about Onyeka, and I think it was when I was on the pod with Reggie, and basically, no, it was I did a pod with Schwinny with the Strickland and the Prez, and they asked basically like with the way Onyeka is playing, would that prevent me from drafting a big man? And personally, right, I have been advocating for Onyeka to be a starter for a very, very long time. Okay, I have tweets going back years, man. Like the data, the eye test has always supported that at some point this transition needed to take place, and it should have happened last year. It should have happened earlier this year, but for whatever reason, whether it's trying to keep Capella's trade value up, but also in actuality too, there were things that Clint Capella did better than Onyeka. And this is what I talked about on that pod, right? For a long time, Capella was better at all the big man things than Onyeka Okongwu. What he has done as a starter is remarkable, right? So like he's had about 29 games as a starter so far. He's averaging essentially 10 boards, and that's a lot of those games without Jalen Johnson, who's his biggest help as a rim protector and a rebounder. He's averaging 14.8 points, 9.9 rebounds, 2.9 assists. He is shooting 71.7% at the rim and 38.2% from 3. He is overall efficiency, 66 true shooting percentage, 2.08 assist to turnover ratio. He's creating 7 points a night. He's also has a plus 12.9 on-off swing, which basically is saying the Hawks are almost 13 points better in terms of offense, or the difference between their offensive and defensive rating with Onyeka on the court. So they're at their best with him on the court as well, right? So every data point is screaming improvement. Every data point is screaming impact. So with that being said, with the way he's playing, does that mean that I don't want the Hawks to take a big, or that I'm fully married to the idea of Onyeka being our starting big? And I'll say that I'm more comfortable with him being a starter than ever, right? That doesn't mean I'm not considering taking a big man. And it's not because I'm necessarily pessimistic about his long-term viability. I just think you see how hard it was for the Lakers to get a big, right? They were so desperate. They signed Alex Len. San Antonio has had some problems with that as well. Denver hasn't had a viable big man backup. Well, I mean, they had Jay Huff and Isaiah Hartenstein, but that was before they were ready to contend, right? Like, in some aspects, big men in the NBA have become a bit undervalued, right? And I think you see that with guys like Jay Huff, or you see that with guys like Isaiah Hartenstein, guys who were cast off and end up becoming really great big men, guys who are doing really well for their particular teams. And the Hawks have an opportunity here with 2 first-round picks to bolster and continue to add to this very promising young core. And that includes Trey. But between Trey, Onyeka, Dyson, Zachary Rizachet, Jalen Johnson, I throw Kobe Buffkin in there. They have a lot of points of need and areas of need checked off, right? So you have um, some semblance of course, a shot creator in Trey Young, primary playmaker, who ties it all together. You have your dynamic two guard who's scaling up offensively and is a menace defensively. You have your do it all forward in Jalen Johnson. You have your 3-and-D-esque with, potential upside in Zachary Rizachet. And then you have your extremely versatile big Onyeka Okongwu, who I think honestly, and this is something Reggie talked about when we spoke, he has we can look at Onyeka and say, okay, he could probably play with a lot of different guys in terms of like front court pairings. Like he's not locked into being a five for the rest of his career because he has these complementary skill sets, whether it's spacing the floor, his passing, his short roll passing, all the different things, right? To be more specific. And I am curious, and I'm very curious to see, like, okay, what does Onyeka look like with a true 7-footer, right? Or if it's not a true 7-footer, what does he look like with just another big man, like in general, right? And so that's why when I look at this draft, which I initially viewed as really weak in terms of big men, there are guys that I like that could potentially be in the Hawks range, and I talked a little bit about that. Um, in general on Twitter. And then when Tyler was on the show, we talked about our draft, needs and guys that we liked in particular spots. Um, Colin Murray Boyles, Kama Malawatch, Alex Condon, Thomas Sorber. Like those are the types of guys that I would still consider and I would still personally take with those picks for the Hawks, especially because they're probably not going to take a guard. Like the Hawks are kind of quietly bloated at guard. You got Trey, you got Dyson, you got Veet, you got Man. That's a lot of guys, and Kobe Buffkin as well. And so ideally, you see Kobe come in and step up some of that creation for the second unit. So with that being said, I don't think they take a guard. And consider the fact that Capella is expiring and so is Larry Nance. Although they have said they want to keep him around for like a veteran presence. Don Barlow is on a long-term contract, but he's still figuring things out defensively. And then Mo Gay is definitely more of a 4. So there is room for taking in a 5, I think, at least in my opinion, on this roster. And I think there's really just not a huge drawback there. Like none of the guys in this draft seemed, at least from my opinion, like I have no intel on it, but like it doesn't seem like they have that type of ego like a certain guy that was in the last draft that would demand a starting spot or want like that shine immediately. And I think that sort of same model we've seen with Derek Lively could be very fruitful for the Hawks, where you have your more vet center start, and then when you need a different look, or depending on matchups, you may bring in Lively or scale up his minutes and scale down the other guys' minutes. And I think I've been beating the drum all season, like versatility, and bringing in a different type of center, or even a center who just does certain things a little bit better than Onyeka. So, like for example, Colin Murray Boyles is more fluid with the ball in his hands, so he can run like more of those fake dribble handoffs you see with Draymond Green. And I would say like his touch is pretty comparable, and he may be even stronger than Onyeka. So like those guys could be interesting. Than Thomas Sorber, who actually reminds me a lot of Onyeka, but he's more strength based and he's a bit slower. He also has a face-up game that Onyeka doesn't necessarily have in his bag just yet. Then you have like Alex Condon, who's more of a post big than I'd say Onyeka is. Onyeka's more like a mismatch. Like Condon can kind of create against bigger guys in the post as well, and then he has some trail 3 and pick and pop potential. And then Malawatch is a true 7-footer, 7'2", ridiculous wingspan, huge lob threat. More than just a drop big, he can do other things on the screen. All that to say, yes, I would consider, even with the way Onyeka is playing, I would still look at other options. But he's playing incredibly well, man. Like it's just really fun to watch because so many of us have been begging for him to start for a very long time. Now, in terms of the clutch stuff, I want to really point out what Caris Levert has done for the Hawks. He has been so important as a secondary ball handler tonight. 6 assists, ended up with 6 points on 11 shots. Sorry, 14 points on 11 shots. He made 6 of them. Got to the free throw line 3 times, and then so he also drew 3 fouls, which is really important because without Jalen Johnson, there really isn't another guy on this roster who consistently, like Dyson, can do it. And of course, Onyeka, when he gets fouled around the rim, he can do it as well. But in terms of like putting pressure on the rim with their creation, there isn't really another guy like that, right? So Caris's ability to create and have the ball in his hands is so important. In the fourth quarter, we saw the Hawks have Trey off the ball um, against the Warriors press, because no like NBA teams press for real, but like they extended their defense, and now it was Caris bringing the ball up the court. They found Trey at the free throw line. He threw a lob to Onyeka. And so when there were moments where Trey was kind of struggling a little bit with Golden State's length, he ended up with a really efficient game, though. He ended up with like 69 true shooting percentage, got to the free throw line a good amount, 7 free throw attempts, shot 8 of 11 on twos, which is really good to see because his floater has been a little bit iffy as he's worked through his shoulder and his Achilles thing. But tonight, I think he made all of his floaters. Yeah, he went 5 for 5, and then he shot 50% on layups. He had some really nice scoop shots. So I think he's playing himself a little bit more back into shape as he's trying to shake off these various injuries that he's fought through this season. But I think a lot of his ability to be efficient is tied to not having to do everything or not having to orchestrate every possession. And you can't do that without having Caris and Dyson on the floor. And that's why Caris was so important, because Dyson is still obviously growing from game to game. His confidence can waver a little bit. Caris is a vet. Caris has done this for teams. He's been the guy for Brooklyn, right? So like seeing these doubles or navigating tight spaces or being more of a creator isn't necessarily foreign to him. And I think that's been so important for this Hawks team as they're trying to figure out what they're going to do, long term. And I think he's a guy that you definitely have to consider bringing back. I think we saw, when you look at like the plus minus numbers, Vit Krejci was the only negative guy tonight. I think just sometimes the lack of size really hurts him. Like he's really quick. He's so smart with the ball in his hands. Like again, he has 6 assists. And I also don't think Snyder is always doing him the biggest favor. Like for example, there's some lineups that I was like, man, I don't know how I necessarily feel about those. And one such lineup is the Trae Young, Niang, Barlow, Vit Krejci, Terrence Mann lineup. Okay. Now this lineup, at least in the fourth quarter, was positive. They were a +4. A lot of that was because Niang was hitting shots. But I'm not a huge fan of that lineup. And the biggest reason why I'm not, you basically don't have any size on the floor, right? They don't have Capella, which in some ways is a blessing, but in other ways, like he's legit size in terms of like when you compare him to Don Barlow and the Niang front court, right? And what was unfortunate for the Hawks is when you play the Warriors, which are a very physical team, especially Jimmy Butler, you really should not put guys out there that do not have size and that can't contend with or contain Jimmy Butler. And it really felt like Jimmy was able to get to his spots much more easier, get to the free throw line much more easier with those types of lineups on the floor. And I think that's why I kind of overlapped a little bit with Vit. And that's the interesting thing too. Like this Hawks team has done a really good job at maximizing the margins. And we talk about that a lot. But these are still marginal players, right? Including Vit. Like Vit is on the type of contract he's on because he does have some intrinsic drawbacks due to the way he plays basketball, right? But, if he's your 11th or 12th man, that's a really great option, especially as he leans more into the high ball and three-point shooting and just like being more of a movement guy as opposed to like a spot-up guy. I think he could become really, really valuable, even more than he is right now because of some of the stuff he can do off the dribble and the passing and all that, right? But I thought this was a pretty well-managed game from Snyder. He was calling timeouts, but of course, when there were runs, Golden State had a pretty solid run in the second quarter that made it kind of close by halftime. I was in the building, so hearing all those Warriors fans is really annoying. So I was really happy that we were able to like keep them at bay for the entirety of the game because I just think it makes it so much sweeter when you're able to win. There was also a big run in the fourth quarter where I mentioned that Gary Payton was kind of causing some problems. He had 6 points during that stretch. Moses Moody also had 7. He got to the free throw line. He hit 2 threes. And that was a little bit scary just because the Hawks defense slipped for a second. The other good thing is they closed with Riza today. And I know that, sometimes Riza can – not sometimes. Riza's sort of minutes and role on the team has been like a hot topic among Hawks fans. And, understandably so. Like he's someone we have high hopes for. And, it's tough to say, okay, how can he develop if he doesn't get these high leverage minutes? And I think it's very much matchup based. And then like, and this is good credit to, or a lot of credit to Snyder here, right? Georges Niang had himself a night. There's been a lot of nights where Niang is shooting really, really well, and Snyder will opt to close with him because of the offense, right? Tonight he closed with this unit played the last 7 minutes or so. Trae Young, Onyeka, Okongwu, Dyson Daniels, Caris Levert, Zachary Leisure. Now this team was not this particular lineup didn't fare really well in that particular portion of the game. Earlier in the game they were just a -1. In the fourth quarter they were -7. I think that it just got a little bit lax defensively, but that particular lineup is a lot more suited to containing a Warriors team than it is if you're gonna have Niang out there, especially if you're gonna have like Veet or Terrence Mann, right? Like having both Dyson, Karis, Dyson and Zach on the floor with Jimmy Butler on the floor should have been the prerogative. Like that should have been, at least in my opinion, like the entire strategy right going to this game. But definitely at least have them when you're closing because you need that size out there. You need the defensive ability. And there were particular moments where, when those guys on the floor together, or even Terrence Mann to his credit as well, like the Hawks are able to rotate a lot smarter. So there was a moment in particular where Dyson gambled. He wasn't able to get it. But I think it was Terrence Mann who ended up rotating, and then which then forced the kick out and ended up being a miss, right? So the Hawks didn't end up getting burnt by that because they had smarter defensive personnel on the floor. But yeah, ultimately, really good win for the Hawks. Again, this is not the same Warriors team without Curry, but this is still a really good Warriors team. They still have yet to have win in Atlanta since 2018, which is great to keep that stretch alive. Which is they're 0-6 in 7 years, 0-7. Yeah, man, I continue to be impressed with Onyeka Okongwu. I continue to be impressed with Dyson Daniels. Zachary Richardson had himself, like I saw that layup earlier on. Dyson had a crazy layup after he stole the ball from Draymond Green. Yeah, man, this Hawks team is pretty firmly in control of their destiny right now. They do have a very important game. Right now they're the 7th seed with about I think a game lead over Miami. Not Miami, sorry, Orlando. And then the game for the tiebreaker would be this upcoming game, which is I think next week or the week after that. They've got a rematch with Orlando. Oh, it's in April 8th. So one of the last games of the season. So that would be definitely a really important matchup for the Hawks, mainly because, obviously the tiebreaker, but in the battle for 7 or 8, you'd much rather play at home for that first game as opposed to on the road. But yeah, hope you all enjoyed this episode. I know it's a little bit shorter than normal. You know, we'll try and mix in a little bit more film for the next game for sure. But I hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all are enjoying the win. If we wipe those Clippers and Nuts losses off, would have been pretty nice to have like, a 3-game stretch at this point, but they've got another game they need to take care of business of against Philadelphia tomorrow, 6 p.m. So yeah, hope y'all enjoyed. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the podcast, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Y'all be safe.